Hi everyone. I am going to share with you today my personal story about why I wish to be buried in a greener, more sustainable way, and the importance of pre-planning. So I was raised in the 1950s in an Italian Catholic family in New York. And my dad died suddenly at the age of 42 when I was 7 years old. Our family followed a traditional model of burial where we used a funeral home and a local cemetery. And the Catholic Church did the Mass, and the funeral director embalmed and cosmetically prepared and dressed the bodies. Then the director and associates assisted with choosing a coffin and arranging for transportation of the body, and the information about the funeral parlor and the cemetery was discussed with the families. A hearse was hired for transportation to and from the church or the funeral home to the cemetery, etc. And all the announcements and rental of the space for viewing, flowers, newspaper article, announcement in the obituary section, memorial holy cards, etc., were made by the funeral director. And that's pretty much the model that my family followed. Mom was overwhelmed, and Dad was very young, so they hadn't planned yet for any kind of arrangements before he died, and consequently, pretty much my mother was unprepared in terms of absorbing the costs at the time of the funeral, and not to mention the emotional costs that were going on. So my mother was advised by the Catholic nuns to leave the children out of the church and funeral home viewing and other funeral services. We, my sister and I, were not told of his death until several months afterwards, and I just thought he was being hospitalized again from his military-connected PTSD and other damages that were caused to him as a result of the military. Being advised not to inform and allow the children to be an interactive part had a big bearing on me, and I often felt betrayed throughout my young adulthood. That was before psychologists advised parents to allow children to grieve and share in services at the time that it's going on. Hopefully this is more the norm now, as this is a better way of dealing with things for most people. The issue of the finances. As a result of not planning ahead, as I said before, the funeral and cemetery costs placed our family on a very difficult trajectory, trying to make sense of it all. While some of these costs could have been attenuated had my family known of their rights, such as not performing embalming services, a smaller headstone, a less expensive coffin, and some of the other costs could have been mitigated and more affordable. So because they did not know to advocate for themselves in this way, they paid pretty much a standard package of services, which was a formidable cost to the family at the time. So Mom was a single mom with really no working skills with 2 small children, and she had to come up with the cost of all of these services, which some of which were really not necessary or could have been compromised. The issue of respecting final wishes. While I was raised Catholic, over the years I studied and practiced a Buddhist-based meditation practice, which taught me that dying as mindfully and consciously as possible would assist in the transfer of consciousness out of the body peacefully. So many people are shaken up by death, and in my family that was the case. In Buddhist practice of yogic breathing and other mindful consciousness practices, we're taught to focus and calm the mind, and to the extent possible, basically we're living our death as peacefully and mindfully as possible. I now wish to follow this model and have written this in my final wishes, to follow a model where my body is left as natural as possible, with preferably a death midwife in place to assist with a home vigil, meaning a home viewing, and prayers in a cotton or linen natural fiber shroud with a natural coffin of native woven willow plants and or anything that is biodegradable and sustainable materials. I would prefer to be buried in a green hybrid cemetery, but because my husband is a military retiree, likely I will be buried with him in a military cemetery. So even though I would prefer a green burial cemetery, I likely will have to compromise. But anyway, at any rate, I want to be as sustainable as possible when I am buried. So the issue of the environmental carbon footprint is a big one, and I or someone else in the section, in the PowerPoint, will give more information about why it's so important to think about not just pre-planning financially and emotionally, but pre-planning in terms of environmental sustainability. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it helps you.